Hey everyone, my name is Will. I'm the CEO of Phonely, and today we're going to be walking through how to use the API request block in Phonely. With API requests, you can literally do anything. So if your integration is not supported on Phonely's platform natively, using an API request and a little bit of helpful AI, you can build a connection from Phonely to any of your systems, so that's your CRM, your scheduling system, or so much more. Today, I'm going to be walking you through a tutorial of how you can get set up and get started with that. So to use the API request inside of Phonely's platform, we can simply just go in here and click plus to add an API request block. The API request block is located right here in one of Phonely's options. So it's a live call action there. Once you've added the API request block here, we natively give you an option to paste from curl. Now, why do we do this? Well, we find that it's really easy to just have AI take your docs and generate a curl and then paste it in there. But if you don't want to do that and you want to do it the old fashioned way, you can simply build it manually by using that. We're going to be generating by curl, and I'm going to give you a little tip. So let's say you have some sort of documentation that you want to have Phonely use to, reference and generate a curl from that. One of the things that you can do is you can just copy and paste that documentation into Phonely's builder, which you can access over here. So you can simply just copy and paste that into a help, and it will generate a curl directly for you there. You can also copy this into ChatGPT as well and generate a curl. Now, why am I stressing on that? Because it's going to make your life easier when you are building these API requests to be able to do that. In my situation, I already have a curl in my command, so I'm just going to paste that there. And what this is curl is just a format in which we can really easily go from some text to an automatic formatting that's going to do everything that you need there. So once we have this in here, we're going to import that from curl. As you can see, it's setting up the API request. So this is not a tutorial on how to use APIs or how to use API requests. There's a bunch of those on YouTube, so I'd highly recommend you checking those out and learning a little bit more about that. But what we can do in Phonely is we can, take that API curl and we can post it in here. So as you can see, we've got a lot of different fields. We've got headers, we've got query parameters, we've got body, and then we have two different options. So if you want to use code mode, which means it's just going to copy and paste whatever code you have there, you can put that information here. Additionally, you can use live variables here. So you can use any of the variables that you have gathered from Phonely's platform and just paste it in there. And that information is going to be, extracted and then used in this API request here. You can also use static values as well. For example, Phonely outbound test. All right, so that's very simply how you can get something set up. Once after you've gone ahead, configured your base API request, we can hit continue, and then we can actually test this response. So in this situation, we are going to send in the body of this information. Now, if you notice here, if you pasted any variables from before, you probably want to replace that with some information, whatever test data that you want to send through to make sure that it works. So if you're collecting a date or a name or a birthday, whatever, you want to test it with something that you know works so that going forward, it's going to work for you in your application there. All right, so as you can see here, we have some response from this API, which is yes, or is going to be no from the answer. So that information is now going to be response. So what we have here is we have some variables that are returned: answer, forced, image. This is all just from the yes/no API, which I decided to use a test for that. Now, when we have that response, what we can do here is once we connect this with any other variables, that information, that data that we've stored, now becomes available for us to use in different blocks. So if we want to use the answer in a filter, we can just look at answer, which we can also access through this API request here. You can see that this is the full entire response. This is the answer, which is the field that we saw from before. This is another field, and this is another field. So then we can use that information here to go through and put in the information. Quick hack: if you hit the @ symbol, you can find the variables simply by searching them. So I'm just going to hit @ and I'm going to look for forced, and then that information comes up really quickly. So in that situation, that's how we can use the API request to go ahead, make a request to that system, and go back and retrieve and actually use that data in our conversation going forward. Now, if we are going to use the API request, let's say that we want to look up some information. Let's say that the answer that we came back from there, we actually want to use that information in a response to talk back and forth with the customer about that information. So one of the ways that we can do that is we can simply put a talk block after this, and then we just want to say like assist the user with the information here about their account. And I'm going to put in the response. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm pretending we have a different use case, but I want to show you an example of how it could be very useful. One of them is, you make an API request to your system to look up the details of somebody's file. That details might have, tracking information. It might have, a variety of different things that that person has, their account information, their number, when they ordered it, how much they have outstanding, whatever you want to put in there. If you just simply take that response, you put it in a talk block and tell the AI to assist the user with information regarding the response, the AI model is going to be able to access all that information and go back and forth with it simply from that. So what's going to happen is they're talking, maybe we do some authentication from it. We use that authentication to make an API request to our system. That information comes back, and then we're using that to have a back and forth conversation with our customers. So this is incredibly valuable if you want your AI agent to be able to do things. We can also do this for appointment scheduling as well. So let's say we have a make first request to the system is to check the availability. We can pull that information back. We can talk back and forth with the customer using the talk block to figure out when their system works with our system for availabilities. And then we can go ahead and make a request to actually book in the appointment. If we go into Phonely's API request block here, you'll see that we already have an API request set up. We're simply just making a GET request to test if it's a yes or a no response. In this API request, we have a couple things. Number one is we have enable error handling, which is basically going to say if it's success, then it goes one path. If it's a failure, then it goes in the other. This is pretty valuable for authentication purposes when you're not just logging information. The second thing that we do have, and you notice there, we have success and failure that popped up as soon as I enabled that. So if I remove it, it's going to go away. The next thing that we have here is retry on failure. Now, what retry on failure does is what we've noticed is occasionally you will have the AI when it makes a request. Let's say that it was using the customer's email address for authentication. Now, if it doesn't get that email address correct on the first time, it's going to automatically pass a failed request. Now, why would it not get it correct? Well, maybe the customer talked too fast and it missed a letter, and it didn't get that exactly perfectly. It's going to cause a failure, and it's going to go down the failure case. What we can do is we hit retry on failure, it's going to reconfirm all the data that we were sent in to that into that variable. So for example, it's going to reconfirm the email address if it fails, and it's going to do that as many times as you need to here. This is incredibly powerful if you want your AI to actually work in production, is the ability to have it retry if it's not a successful API request. So highly recommend turning that on. I recommend setting it to 1 to 2 times. It doesn't have to be a ton, just because it will annoy customers if they're actually not authenticated and they shouldn't be, getting the thing that you need them to do. The next thing that we have is a timeout duration. So the timeout duration allows you to set how long we will wait for the API request to come back. So when we're making an API request, it's going to say something in the middle. Right now we have an interim message prompt, which is saying a 3 to 7 word interim message to inform the customers you're working on it. We find this is much more natural because it'd be like, just give me a second as I check that, or 1 moment, please, or something like that. But you can also have a fixed message as well if you would like to set whatever you want for that specific API request. But that timeout duration is once we make that request, we're going to say the interim message, like, just give me a second while I check that. And then after we do that, we'll wait 25 seconds before we consider it to be a failed response and go down the failure case if you've set that. We additionally have something that's called a post interim message delay. So sometimes we found it a little bit weird if the response comes back super fast for the agent say 1 moment, please, and then immediately go into the next response. So if you want, you can add a little bit of an extra delay. If, for example, in some use cases in sales or whatever, you're thinking about your AI agent needs a little bit more time to, the person would take a little bit more time to come back with that information. So you can actually adjust that up to 60 seconds. The last thing that we have here in the advanced API request block is call outcome tagging. Call outcome tagging allows us to simply tag the block so that we know later on for analysis what block this was on, and all that information is available in variables as well. All right, that is the advanced settings of the API request block. As you can see here, you can really kind of configure it to do anything that you want. And if you ever need help building an integration, our team actually will build integrations for you on our enterprise plan. So if you're looking to wow, that was a lot of work. All I want Phonely to do is just integrate with my system, book my appointments, send stuff to my CRM, and I want it to work every single time. Well, don't worry. That is what our literal entire team is designed to do, is to help that make you happen. But if you got more time than money and you want to learn and want to do this yourself, I highly recommend going in, playing around, building it from yourself, and using some of the many advanced features that Phonely has in its platform. So if you're new to this and your first time seeing Phonely, thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I know it's a bit of a technical one, but I hope that you learned something and you can implement these tools to help you automate more things using voice AI technology. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.